Two legends, one studio. A recording session that was supposed to make history but instead became the most closely guarded secret in music industry folklore. March 1992. If you ask anyone who was at Paisley Park that night about what happened between Prince and Whitney Houston, they'll tell you they don't remember. They'll change the subject. They'll suddenly have somewhere else to be. But their eyes will tell you a different story. Their eyes will tell you they remember every single second. The session started normally enough. Two virtuosos circling each other creatively, testing boundaries, pushing limits. Prince at his most intense, Whitney at her most vulnerable. And then, somewhere in the early morning hours, something snapped. The music stopped. The lights seemed to dim. And Whitney Houston walked to the bathroom, locked the door, and didn't come out for 43 minutes. When Prince's cleaning staff arrived the next morning, they found the mirror, found the words written in lipstick, found the message that would be photographed, documented, and then officially denied by everyone involved. This is the story of what really happened in those 43 minutes. This is the story of what Whitney wrote. And this is why Prince's family tried so desperately to erase it. Before we go deeper into this untold story, if you want more revelations about music's greatest mysteries, hit that subscribe button. We bring you the stories that the industry tried to bury. The invitation had come through unusual channels. Prince didn't typically reach out to collaborate with artists at Whitney's level of stardom. He was protective of his creative space, suspicious of those who carried the weight of massive commercial success. But something about Whitney intrigued him. Perhaps it was the rumors he'd heard about her struggles. Perhaps it was the challenge of working with a voice that some considered superior even to his own precise, multifaceted instrument. Whatever the reason, the call was made in February 1992, and by mid-March, Whitney Houston was on a plane to Minneapolis. The context matters here. This wasn't the Whitney of 1985, fresh off her debut album's unprecedented success. This wasn't even the Whitney of 1987, dominating the charts with her sophomore release. This was a woman carrying invisible weights. Her marriage to Bobby Brown was already showing cracks that would eventually become chasms. The pressures of maintaining a flawless public image while managing private turmoil had begun to fracture something essential inside her. And Prince, with his almost supernatural ability to sense vulnerability in others, recognized this immediately. Paisley Park in 1992 was operating at full intensity. Prince had just come through his battles with Warner Brothers over creative control, battles that would eventually lead him to change his name to an unpronounceable symbol. He was recording at a furious pace, sometimes working 20-hour sessions, surviving on minimal sleep and maximum creative obsession. His inner circle had learned to match his rhythm or step aside. There was no middle ground in Prince's universe. You either surrendered completely to the work or you became irrelevant. Whitney arrived at Paisley Park on a Tuesday evening, just after sunset. Those present remember her entrance clearly. She wore minimal makeup, unusual for someone so accustomed to camera-ready perfection. Her hair was pulled back simply. She carried herself with the posture of someone preparing for battle, not collaboration. Prince met her in the main studio, Studio A, where he did his most important work. The room was bathed in purple light, his signature color casting everything in an otherworldly glow. The initial conversation was cautious. Two apex predators circling, assessing, measuring. Prince showed her some tracks he'd been developing, instrumental pieces that needed the right voice to bring them to completion. Whitney listened with the focused intensity she brought to all her professional work. She asked technical questions about key changes, about the emotional arc Prince envisioned. And slowly, the ice began to break. They found common ground in their shared perfectionism, their mutual understanding that good was never good enough, that only transcendent would suffice. Around midnight, they began actual recording. Prince positioned himself at the mixing board while Whitney took her place at the microphone. The first takes were exploratory, feeling out the melody, testing ranges and possibilities. Whitney's voice, even in these preliminary runs, filled the studio with a richness that made everyone present stop what they were doing. It was the kind of voice that didn't just carry notes, but emotions, stories, entire lifetimes compressed into sustained tones and controlled vibrato. But Prince wasn't satisfied. He rarely was. He stopped the track, suggested different approaches, asked Whitney to try techniques that challenged her traditional training. He wanted rawness where she offered polish. He wanted vulnerability where she provided power. And this is where the first tensions emerged. Whitney Houston had spent her entire career perfecting a specific vocal approach, one that emphasized technical brilliance and emotional control. Prince was asking her to abandon that, to strip away the armor she'd built through years of training and performance. The track they were working on dealt with themes of hidden pain, of maintaining facades while drowning internally. The lyrics, written by Prince specifically for this session, cut close to bone for anyone struggling with private demons while living public lives. And as Whitney sang them, take after take, something began to shift in the room's atmosphere. Her voice started cracking in places it never had before. Not from technical failure, but from emotional overflow. The walls she maintained so carefully in every interview, every public appearance, every carefully managed moment of her career, those walls began to crumble in the face of Prince's relentless pursuit of authentic expression. Around 2:30 in the morning, Prince stopped the session. He came out from behind the mixing board and approached Whitney at the microphone. What was said in that moment remains disputed. Some who were present claim Prince was offering encouragement, pushing her toward a breakthrough. Others suggest his words were more confrontational, challenging her to access emotions she'd kept locked away. Whatever the specifics, the result was undeniable. Whitney's composure, already fragile from hours of emotionally exhausting takes, finally broke completely. She stepped away from the microphone. Her hands were shaking. Prince reached out, perhaps to steady her, perhaps to continue the conversation. But Whitney pulled back, shaking her head. The tears that had been threatening throughout the session finally came, and once they started, they didn't stop. She turned and walked quickly out of the main studio area, heading toward the private bathroom adjacent to the recording space. The sound of the lock clicking into place echoed through the suddenly silent studio like a gunshot. Prince stood outside the bathroom door for the first 10 minutes. Those present remember him pressing his forehead against the wood, speaking in low tones that didn't carry far enough for anyone to hear clearly. He wasn't angry. If anything, those who knew him best said he seemed stricken, as if he'd pushed something too far and was only now realizing the consequences. He knocked softly several times. He asked Whitney to come out, to talk to him, to let him explain or apologize or whatever was needed to repair what had broken. But there was no response from the other side of the door. Susan Rogers, the sound engineer who had worked with Prince for years, approached him carefully. She suggested giving Whitney space, letting her process whatever had been triggered by the session. Prince nodded slowly and finally stepped back from the door. He returned to the mixing board and sat down, but he didn't touch any of the controls. He just sat there, staring at nothing, while the minutes ticked by in oppressive silence. Inside the bathroom, Whitney was facing herself in the mirror. The woman staring back at her was unrecognizable in some fundamental way. The careful mask she showed the world had been stripped away by Prince's musical excavation of her deepest vulnerabilities. And in that moment of raw, unfiltered self-confrontation, she did something that would become the center of music industry legend. She reached into her purse, pulled out a tube of red lipstick, and began writing on the mirror. What Whitney wrote on that mirror has been the subject of speculation, rumor, and deliberate misinformation for over 3 decades. Official sources have always denied that anything was written at all. Prince's estate has maintained complete silence on the matter. But multiple sources who were present that night, who saw the mirror before it was cleaned, have confirmed that the message existed. And while exact wording varies slightly between accounts, the core content remains consistent. 6 words. Written in crimson lipstick across the bathroom mirror in Whitney Houston's distinctive handwriting. 6 words that explained everything about why she locked herself away, about what the recording session had forced her to confront, about the unbearable weight of living a life constructed for public consumption rather than private truth. The words were, "I don't know who I am." This wasn't a philosophical musing. It wasn't poetic expression or artistic contemplation. It was a raw confession from a woman who had become so consumed by the Whitney Houston brand, the image, the expectation, that she'd lost touch with whoever existed beneath all those layers. Prince's relentless pursuit of authentic emotion in the studio had cracked open something that Whitney had kept sealed for years. And once opened, the realization poured out. But there was more. Below those 6 words, Whitney had added something else. A second line that provided context and made the message even more devastating. She wrote, "And I don't think I can find her again." Whitney emerged from the bathroom 43 minutes after she'd entered. Her face was cleaned of tears, her composure rebuilt as well as it could be under the circumstances. She walked past Prince without making eye contact, gathered her belongings, and left Paisley Park. She would never return. The collaboration that was supposed to produce groundbreaking music resulted in nothing but unusable takes and emotional wreckage. Prince remained in the studio for hours after Whitney left. He listened to the recordings from that night, particularly the final takes before everything fell apart. Those who heard those recordings said they contained some of the most powerful vocal performances Whitney Houston had ever delivered. Raw, vulnerable, heartbreaking in their honesty. But Prince never released them. He locked the tapes in his legendary vault, where they presumably remain to this day, heard by no one but him. The next morning, when the cleaning staff arrived at Paisley Park, they found the message on the bathroom mirror. Protocol in such situations was clear. They were to photograph any unusual occurrences and report them to management before cleaning. The mirror was photographed. The image was filed. And then, on direct orders that allegedly came from Prince himself, the mirror was cleaned and the photograph was buried so deep in Paisley Park's archives that it might as well have been destroyed. In the weeks and months following that session, both Prince and Whitney underwent noticeable changes. Prince became even more reclusive, more protective of his creative space. He granted fewer collaborations, trusted fewer people with access to his process. Some who knew him well suggested that what happened with Whitney haunted him, that he recognized he'd pushed an already vulnerable person past their breaking point in pursuit of artistic truth. Whitney's trajectory is more publicly documented. Within a year of the Paisley Park session, her marriage to Bobby Brown became tabloid fodder. Her struggles with substance abuse, long rumored but carefully hidden, began to surface more publicly. The woman who had maintained such pristine control over her image started showing cracks that would eventually become the story of her tragic final years. Whether the Paisley Park session was a catalyst or simply a symptom of deeper issues remains debatable. But the timing is undeniable. There were attempts at reconciliation. Prince reached out several times in the years that followed. He sent messages through intermediaries, tried to arrange conversations, wanted to explain or apologize, or simply acknowledge what had happened between them. But Whitney never responded. The door she'd locked that night in Paisley Park remained locked between them for the rest of their lives. The story of Prince and Whitney's doomed collaboration has become something of a dark fairy tale in music industry circles. It's whispered about at late-night sessions, referenced obliquely in documentaries, hinted at in unauthorized biographies. But the full truth has never been officially confirmed. Prince's death in 2016 ensured that one half of the story would remain forever untold. Whitney's passing in 2012 had already sealed her side of the narrative. Yet the message on the mirror, whether you believe the specific wording or not, resonates because it speaks to something universal about fame, artistry, and the cost of perfection. Both Prince and Whitney were artists who demanded absolute excellence from themselves. They constructed personas that could bear the weight of global stardom. But personas are not people. And somewhere in the gap between who we are and who we show the world, something essential can be lost. Prince understood this better than most. His battles for creative control, his name change, his constant reinvention, all of it stemmed from a fundamental need to remain sovereign over his own identity. He saw in Whitney someone who had surrendered that sovereignty, who had allowed the machine of fame to reshape her into something that served others rather than herself. And in trying to crack that facade open in service of musical truth, he may have revealed damages too deep to repair. This story matters not because of its darkness, but because of what it reveals about the price of artistic greatness. Prince wasn't trying to destroy Whitney Houston that night in Paisley Park. He was trying to reach something real in both of them, to create music that transcended commercial polish and touched something primal and true. His methods were intense, perhaps too intense for someone already struggling with identity and purpose. But his intention came from a place of artistic integrity that defined his entire career. Whitney's message on the mirror, those devastating words about lost identity, weren't an accusation. They were a confession, a moment of clarity forced by Prince's uncompromising pursuit of emotional honesty in art. What happened in those 43 minutes behind that locked bathroom door was a confrontation with self that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Prince had simply provided the catalyst. The photograph of that mirror, buried somewhere in Paisley Park's archives, represents one of music history's most powerful untold stories. It's a reminder that behind every perfect performance, every flawless recording, every carefully crafted public image, there are human beings struggling with questions of identity, purpose, and authenticity. Prince and Whitney were titans of their industry, possessing talents that touched millions. But they were also just people, trying to figure out who they were when the lights went down and the crowds went home. The mirror has been cleaned. The message has been erased. But for those who know the story, who understand what happened in Paisley Park that March night in 1992, the words remain. I don't know who I am, and I don't think I can find her again. It's a haunting epitaph for a collaboration that never was, and a reminder that sometimes the pursuit of artistic truth can reveal damages too profound to heal. Prince spent the rest of his life protecting his artistic vision and personal identity with fierce determination. Perhaps what he learned from Whitney's mirror message informed that vigilance. Perhaps seeing someone else's identity crisis reflected back so starkly reinforced his own commitment to remaining sovereign over himself, no matter the cost. We'll never know for certain, but the story endures, passed down through industry whispers and late-night studio legends, a cautionary tale about the moment when artistic pursuit meets human fragility, and neither emerges unchanged.